Chief Section of Physical Medicine Rehabilitation and the W. Kennon McWilliams Professor in Sports Medicine at Tulane University. Specializes in disability prevention, rehabilitative medicine, sports medicine, and has a particular interest in sports concussion. He serves as the Director of Sports Concussion Management Program and Team Physician at Tulane University, always there for their teams. You see him on the sideline for football frequently. He served as a team physician for professional, collegiate, and high school teams for over 25 years. Please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Greg Stewart of Tulane Sports Medicine. Greg?
Thanks. Appreciate the invitation to be here today. You know, it's actually, I don't want to tell too many people, it's actually over 30 years. And it's just kind of older and older with all this. Yeah, no, I'm not telling many people about that at all. And, you know, we come from Tulane Institute of Sports Medicine and, you know, excited to be here. But I think more interesting is some of the stuff that we're doing with former NFL players. We've got a couple of programs that we have where we see a lot of former guys. And one of the nice things is it has allowed us to kind of come back and use what we're learning in guys who've been out from the league to be able to bring back to the collegiate ranks and the high school ranks and even youth ranks as far as the kinds of things that we're learning from a medical and mental health standpoint. One of our programs that we have where we travel around the country, we just got back from Detroit, where we see former players for cardiovascular metabolic screenings, where we're looking at high blood pressure, cholesterol, sleep apnea, these kinds of things. I'm going to come back to that here in a minute. We go 10 places a year. We're at Draft, we're at Super Bowl, we're at the Hall of Fame, and we got another couple of places that we go as well. And in case you think that sounds real interesting and exciting, when it comes time for Super Bowl, the hotel rates all change on Friday night and they ship us out. So we're watching Super Bowl from the same place you are, which is at home with doing that. But we see, you know, at that, we see about 500 guys a year as we travel around the country. It's actually a research project. We've seen about 1,500, 1,600 guys in the years that we've been doing that. And that's a program that we actually have with the NFL Player Care Foundation. So it's a league-sponsored program. The other program that we have is through the Trust, which is a program that's funded through the NFL Players Association. So this is the union side of everything. So we're actually one of the few places in the country that have contracts with both sides of the league. I think some of that comes from primarily what we're doing is seeing former players. The Trust actually sends players here to New Orleans. They come in for a 3-day evaluation. We see them, they come in Monday through Wednesday, Wednesday through Friday, and they come in for comprehensive evaluation. We're doing x-rays, MRI of the brain, neuropsychological testing, psychiatry, neurology, orthopedics, sleep study, hearing balance, all these other ton of blood work where we come through and are really kind of looking at them from the, just from a total health standpoint, to kind of see where they are and what we're kind of dealing with. When we first put that, and all that's done at our clinic downtown, which is our professional athlete care team clinic, where we just see former professional athletes, some of whom are up on the stage, but you know, for privacy reasons, I can't mention any names. And so as we see them initially with that program, and when we went up to present to the Players Association, this actually was initially thought to be a post-concussion program. Everyone kind of thought that this was going to be about concussion and brain injury and the sequela and the consequences of doing that. And what we've actually found is that this is all about transition and it's about mental health. That the reality is that what we're seeing from a concussion standpoint is limited. A lot of what we're seeing are guys that aren't ready to transition out of the league, so they haven't, now that this has become a year-round sport, that they haven't done the kinds of things to prepare to leave the league. And then all of a sudden they've got issues with regard to transition, and then mental health becomes one of the big issues that we're dealing with as well with these guys. Some of it transition related, some of it just the same kind of mental health problems that everyone has. The thing I think that's been interesting with regard to this, so the program where the guys come and see us is actually a clinical program, and we're not allowed to do any research on those guys. But as we ask them questions and talk to them, a couple of things that I think that are interesting from the guys that come in, because we'll ask them, if, talk to them about their problems, and some of them will go through, I do have memory problems, I've got, mental health problems, I got some anger issues, I got my shoulder and my back and my knees and everything else, and they're sitting there with this long litany of problems that they have. And a lot of times they come in and their wives are there, and the wives are on the other side, and you ask them the question, if you had the opportunity to go back and do this all over again, would you? They all smile, and I'll go, oh, absolutely. So there's a few that don't. So probably 95%. We've seen almost 500 guys that have come through this program. So 95% absolutely, they do it all over again. The other 5% fall into two categories. Either they were two sport guys and they would have done their other sport, or they didn't like the business of football. So they'd have gone back and done high school and collegiate ball, but would not have played professionally. They just didn't like the business of the sport. And then when we go back and talk to them about, would you let your kids play? Probably 85+% of them say yes, they let their kids play. Now they wouldn't let them play till high school because they want someone who's coaching them who's actually a coach. They don't want someone else's parents coaching them who doesn't understand that whole coaching and the mindset and what goes on, and are doing different drills and stuff based on what they've seen on movies and things like that. They want people that are actually trained as coaches. But I think one of the things that's become even more interesting, and I think this is, we're going to kind of go down this road with the concussion stuff, especially given a couple of things that have come out this last week, is that as we've looked at these guys who have played, and we go around the country with the older guys, and we look at what they're doing from Player Care Foundation, and we're looking at cardiovascular issues, we're looking at metabolic issues, and one of the things that we know are the kinds of things that impact brain health. So we know some of the things that can actually give you trouble. So high blood pressure, which these guys have 10 to 20 years younger than the general population, and they're not being followed up because none of them go to the doctor. None of them follow up with anybody to do that. They elevated cholesterol, they have pre-diabetes at a higher incidence than the general population, they have sleep apnea at a higher incidence than the general population, a whole host of other kinds of changes that we see in them as well, all of which potentially impact brain health, and in and of themselves, had they never played football, lead to a higher incidence of dementia. So a lot of the things that we're seeing, these are guys who just aren't taking care of themselves, and so we're trying to find these things and actually go back and do something to help them take care of themselves. Now, don't hear me be a denier, because we've seen stuff, we've got guys, we've got former Hall of Famers that we've seen that we know actually have some of the changes that go along with chronic brain injury, multiple concussions, some of the subconcussive hits with being on the line and doing those kinds of things. But I don't think we're seeing this to the degree that you would expect to see from the media. So the study that came out back in 2017, I think it was 110 of 111 former players all had signs of CTE, that chronic traumatic encephalopathy that everybody worries about. And when we see the guys come in, that's the elephant in the room. That's what they want to hear about as we do the exit and go through and talk about all of this stuff with them. One of the things that we found as we go through all of this, and there's just been a big op-ed that came out, I think in the New York Times, Merrill Hodge just came out with a book looking at all of this, and some of the things that we've been saying early on is that the science was bad, is that they asked for people They wanted brains of people who were having problems. Well, if you're looking for people who are having problems, most likely you're going to find problems. And that's what they did. They didn't have a control group. They didn't factor in issues with regard to people who had other mental health issues, family histories of dementia, and a lot of other things that could potentially lead to some of the things that we're now seeing with regard to the individuals that have developed CTE. So not to say that it doesn't exist, because it does. We've seen it. We've actually started a brain bank where we're looking at some of this, and we've got a couple of guys, and some of the things that we find is that some of the changes that are consistent with CTE we've seen in these guys as well. But some of the things that we want to be able to look at is, what are some of these other things really impact? Some of the other issues that impact brain health as well. And so that's kind of where we're going with some of this, and trying to look at it and come up with ways to kind of help make this safer. Yes, I think taking the face masks off, probably taking the helmets off is really going to would do that, but we all know they're not going to go back and make those kind of changes with regard to what's going on. But I think those are some of the things I think that are important that we'll end up seeing as we go along and go down the line, is that pendulum is really swung. And I think that if you go back, one of the other issues that everyone's concerned about with CTE is that you have the risk of suicide. And I go back and argue that if that is really what we're seeing, then we should have an epidemic of former high school football players committing suicide, and we don't. So there's something else that's going on with all of this. There's something else that's happening. Football is taking is getting a bad rap with this, getting a bad reputation. I think that there are ways to make it safer without babyfying the game, not the word that's used, but close enough, with regard to some of the things that we're seeing with football. And I think there are some things that we can do as we move forward. One other thing, as I came in, one of the questions came up about steroids and asking about steroids and human growth hormone and some of the other things. We're not currently asking that when we travel around the country, but one of the things that we're finding in guys that we talked to who did take steroids early on is that we're seeing long-term issues with regard to the heart muscle, that they're actually having changes with regard to heart function because of the steroids. So the steroids actually, and growth hormone, actually cause muscle to get bigger, and the heart's just a specialized muscle. So we're seeing changes long-term with regard to the heart that are actually causing problems in some of the guys that we've seen that are obviously juiced back in the day are having a lot of issues with early heart failure and some other changes with regard to that. So we are seeing some changes that go along with the old stuff. Questions? I kind of opened up a bunch of stuff.
I have two questions. Are you seeing an overlap in your two things, in your two studies? And the other thing is, a lot of these young men, they are having to retire in their 30s. And so is it a matter of that they've been regimented to do all of everything for so many years, and then all of a sudden they have no focus in life a lot of times, and they also tend to be a little large in size, so they're not really beginning to take care of themselves? Is that one of the things that seems to be the biggest problem?
So yes, so on the first question on the overlap, absolutely. As a matter, so the program that's league sponsored, we travel around the country. We're the only institution that does that. For the trust, the other one, it's us, Cleveland Clinic, Mass General, and University of North Carolina. So there is overlap. So we actually, when we travel, we recruit into the trust to do that. And we try and recruit them here, and I occasionally get in trouble with the trust for trying to recruit people in Detroit to bypass Cleveland to come to New Orleans, but we do that. And vice versa. So when we go travel around, anybody that we've seen, we reach out to them. So there's a lot of overlap with regard to that. And And here in the city with our clinic is that even though some of those things are funded outside, we'll see former professional athletes for all their regular follow-up and everything as well. It's a setup, our clinic's set up a little different. We understand the needs and kind of how they access healthcare that's different. And so we kind of go through and do set it up very differently. But yes, there's definitely overlap. As far as the other, I would say that, so when I give some of these talks at medical school, and shut me up when it's time for me to shut up, that at medical school, so you figure that you've got people that are in medical school that we're talking to residents that are in their mid-late 20s. So I always tell them, I say, so imagine that you have spent your entire life waiting to be here listening to me. This is it. This is the best it's ever going to get. At the end of this, we're actually going to give you a ring because you got to come and hear me talk. And at the end of this, though, tomorrow, you've got to turn all your books in. That's it. You're done. You've spent your whole life wanting to be right here, right now. Tomorrow, someone's going to knock on your door, and they're going to say, you got to give me your books back. And that's all they're going to say to you. They're not going to tell you what else to do. They're just going to tell you you can't do what you've been doing anymore. And good luck. Your swipe card doesn't work anymore to get into the School of Medicine. None of it matters anymore, and so you're done. And the reality is there's not a whole lot of people who care anymore. And so yes, so you've gone from playing in stadiums with tens to 100,000 people cheering for you, watching yourself on TV, and having maybe millions of people watch you on TV, to now what are you going to do? And so there is a big change. I think that's a lot of the mental health issues. They access healthcare differently. I mean, you know, ask these guys whether or not they go in and have to go sit in a waiting room to see the doctor. They don't. They come in the back door. If it's in the middle of clinic, then they're waiting up by x-ray until the exam room opens, and then they're the next one in, and then they get seen. At Tulane, they come by early in the morning, and that's it. That's all we do is see these guys. And so they're used to that. Story of a former player who went in, was sick, his wife sent him to the doctor. He goes in, signs in, sits down. He comes home that night, and his wife asks him, says, so what did the doctor have to say? He goes, I don't know. He said, what do you mean you don't know? I didn't see a doctor. What do you mean you didn't see a doctor? You went? Yeah, I went. Well, what happened? I went up, I signed in. 30 minutes later, I hadn't been called back. I've never waited 30 minutes to see a doctor. I left. And and the wife just kind of goes, hey, dummy, that's the real world. That's how this works. And they're not used to accessing health care. So that's another thing with regard to not getting care, is the world that they are dumped into is very different from the world they've been raised in.
Yes. Of all the former players you've seen, either traveling or in your clinic, and you ran into a litany of different things, what do you think the top 3 concerns they have are?
Top 3 concerns that they come in with are, I would say CTE is a concern for all of them. You know, we made a movie for them to tell them how bad this is going to be. So they all come in and are worried about that. We talk to them all about it, and we tell them, you know, here, we've done this stuff and we don't see anything to make us think you have it. There's often a visible and audible sigh of relief that, okay, this is all right. Mental health becomes the other one when they come in. And really, they don't come in and say, I've got mental health issues. They tell you that they have anger issues, that they lose their temper quicker than they used to. They just don't feel like getting up. I mean, they give you the list of symptoms, but it's mental health. And then it's generally some musculoskeletal aches and pains. But probably easily the top 2 are worried about CTE and mental health. And then you kind of start, you know, mixing and matching different things. Thank you all.
Thank you.